Everybody, this is Katrina and Jen. We're here for the school board delegation training. I'm Katrina Matheson with the Toronto Schools Caregiver Coalition.
And I'm Jennifer Wong with the Toronto York Region Labor Council, also fund our schools. Okay.
So first I want to introduce myself and the group that I have been organizing with. So I started a group a couple years ago called the Toronto Schools Caregiver Coalition. We're a grassroots group, and it started basically with me sending a cold email to all of the school council chairs. I was a school council chair at the time, and I felt like there were really serious problems at our school that weren't really being addressed, and they weren't the fault of the principal. That was just like problems like kids being hungry at school and just things that were really structural problems. And so I sent out an email to all of the school council chairs, and I got 15 replies, and that was sort of how our groups started. And we've grown since then over the last 2 years to now I have about 1,000 parents on my list, and I am regularly in contact with a lot of parents directly just about the stuff that's going on in their schools or initiatives that they're taking on that really stem from underfunding. And a really important feature of my philosophy towards organizing is that this kind of organizing is nonpartisan. It affects people of every political stripe, every type of family. If your kid is in public school, school funding should be important to you, and that's really important to keep in mind.
Thanks, Katrina. I'm part of the Fund Our Schools Coalition, and how it started and what happened was during the pandemic, I just kept in touch with all the education locals, Catholic, public, both in Toronto and York Region. And I was hearing similar stories, across whatever school board it was, whatever region, that, of massive problems happening in the schools, workers being burnt out, having violent incidences, going on WSIB, going on sick leave, and then having lots of unfilled vacancies across all school boards because of the conditions inside our schools. So I pulled together with, the Toronto Labor Council, Toronto York Region Labor Council, QP 4400, Toronto Education Workers, Elementary Teachers of Toronto, and OSSTF Toronto. We put together a campaign called the Fund Our Schools Coalition, which we've been asking union members working within education to actually report their stories, to refute the claims that historic investments are being made in publicly funded education. Really quickly, the three main goals of the campaign, you can see them from the website, but restore public education funding to pre-2018 levels, fix our schools, address the billions of dollars in backlog, and protect our education funding for the future, invest in it, and commit to that the funding will never fall below the rate of inflation. So that's it in a nutshell. This part of our, webinar is talking about what's a delegation, who, what, where, when. And the goal of this short clip is so folks listening can understand the structure of school boards and the opportunities everybody has to make a delegation. A delegation, for folks who don't know, is also known as a deputation. For other, municipally, provincially, federally, we might call it a deputation, but at the school board level, we call it a delegation. And, there's different committees that trustees are pulled together into, whether it's called governance and policy, finance, or budget and enrollment committee. Delegations, to our knowledge, both Katrina and I, are typically allowed at the committee level and not at the whole board level. And just for folks who don't know, that there are many school boards who operate more and more in-camera sessions. So what does in-camera mean? It means only the people inside the room. So the trustees inside the room, it is not open to the public. And more school boards, in York Region and others, are having 75 to 80% of their meetings in camera only. So there is no public transparency and no accountability for what was discussed or what decisions were made. Those records are not made public. And Katrina.
Thanks. So I'm going to just start with the who. So first of all, who can delegate? And the answer is anyone. Students are especially encouraged to delegate. Trustees love when students delegate. It gives them a really great insight into what is actually happening at the school. And they really, the students are the experts. They really can't argue with that. The topic of your delegation doesn't necessarily need to be on the agenda. However, you may not be able to delegate more than once on the same topic in a year. So that's something that you might have to keep in mind, and check with your board beforehand. So what do we do in a delegation? So first of all, we advocate for our children. We share our personal or professional expertise. We begin or continue a dialogue, and we go on record.
Oh, that's me. Where do we delegate? Normally before the pandemic, it was usually only in person only at the board's meeting headquarters. Since the pandemic, there's been more options available. I'm not sure about all school boards, but in Toronto, there's the option to phone in or Zoom in. You should usually receive details after you sign up about how do you get there. We also recommend that you check your school board's public calendar. They have their committee meetings published, their board of the whole meeting published. Delegations, like we said before, are usually allowed during the committee meetings, but check with your board. And we said this before, portions of the meeting might be in camera, not open to the public, and so it might affect the starting time of your delegation. Katrina?
Thanks. Well, let's skip this one because it duplicates the priors.
Okay.
Okay, how do I know what meeting to delegate at? So in general, it doesn't really matter. The topic of your delegation need not be on the agenda. You can delegate on any topic. However, if you have time to plan, you can ask your trustee beforehand to maybe consider moving a motion that might speak to your topic. Anything that has a budget impact should be considered in, whatever the finance and budgeting equivalent of your board committees are. And agendas for each committee meeting are usually released a day or two before the meeting, so you'll have to check the school board website. But you can submit to delegate no matter what it says on the agenda.
All right. Thank you for listening to this section.